Hi students, welcome to your online Sunday school class. This semester, we're going to learn all about Israel's life after their escape from Egypt, their 40 years of wandering in the desert. Moses has passed on to the next life, and their new leader Joshua successfully led them into the promised land. They have conquered the land of Canaan and settled in. We are going to look at the life of Israel after settling into the land of Canaan. How have they lived their lives? How was the land divided? How are the children of Israel living in the current situation? Let's all see the life of Israel in the lesson to come. Now, before we go further into the lesson, let's discuss the two national holidays that we celebrate, that is Independence Day and Republic Day. We do know what is the significance of both these days, but we know very little details about Republic Day. So let's discuss. Now, if you can see the picture on the screen, we can see that we celebrate Independence Day on 15th August and we celebrate Republic Day on 26th January. Now, what does Independence Day signify? It signifies our independence from the Britishers, and we first celebrated our Independence Day on 15th August 1947. We celebrate becoming a sovereign republic on the 26th of January 1950, that is 3 years from the Independence Day. The symbol of the Independence Day is the national flag, the tricolor, whereas the symbol of the Republic Day is a book called the Indian Constitution. The impact of the Independence Day was we got rid of our past colonial rulers, whereas the Indian Constitution gave us a pattern for governing the country for the future. The chief hero for our Independence Day was none other than Mahatma Gandhi, who is also known as the father of the nation, whereas the architect of the Indian Constitution was none other than Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. We celebrate Independence Day on 15th August because the British Parliament passed the Bill of Indian Independence just 1 month prior to that. Whereas 26th January was selected in commemoration of the annual celebration of Independence Day since the first time on 26th January 1930, the year in which the civil disobedience movement began. So on Independence Day, we merely got rid of our former rulers, but who was going to hold the reins of power? On Republic Day, we gave ourselves a constitution and decided how we were going to henceforth govern ourselves. But framing this constitution was not an easy matter. If you have studied history and civics, you have seen a lot of choices had to be made. One India or a divided India, Hindu state or a secular state. What were the values, what were the freedom of choices that we had as Indian citizens? The people of Israel, so far after coming out of the slavery of Egypt, have lived under the rule of the prophets and the judges. We are going to look at how their lives are going to change in today's lesson.
God's story. Joshua becomes leader. So part of God's story is about when Joshua became leader of God's family, and it goes like this. Remember how God rescued his family when they were stuck as slaves in Egypt? He made a path right through the middle of the Red Sea. He showed them where to go with a pillar of fire at night and a cloud during the day. He gave them water from rocks and sent food like rain every morning. Best of all, he promised to bring them to an amazing new home called Canaan. All they had to do was trust him. But sometimes people have a hard time believing God will take care of them. So for a whole year, God's family worried and complained. They felt like they'd never get to the promised home where they would be safe and comfortable. And even though God was taking care of them every day, they kept worrying that he'd stop. But their leader Moses trusted God with his whole heart. And one day, God told Moses to send 12 men into Canaan as spies to see how great it was. So Moses did. And one of those 12 men was Moses' helper, Joshua. He trusted God too. Well, Joshua and the other spies spent 40 days in Canaan, and they discovered that the new home was as good as God had promised. There was delicious food, Water flowed nearby. It was paradise. It had everything God's family needed and wanted. There was just one teeny tiny problem. People lived there already. Big people. Big people who lived in a big city called Jericho that was protected with really big, strong walls. And the people there did not plan to give up their home. So 10 of the spies came back terrified. They said, "We look like grasshoppers compared to the people there." When the rest of God's family heard that, they got scared too. They didn't want to go to the promised land anymore. But Joshua knew that no problem is too big for God. He and another spy named Caleb argued, "If the Lord wants to give it to us, He will." After all, God had shown his family how powerful He was. But even though God had always provided for his family, they still chose not to trust Him. And because they made that choice, there was a consequence. God kept His whole family in the desert for 39 more years. So long that all the adults who chose not to trust that God could take them to the new land spent the rest of their lives in the wilderness. God kept taking care of them, of course, but life was nothing like it would have been in the promised home. The good news is, there was a blessing for Joshua and Caleb's obedience. They did live long enough to get to Canaan. See, God always keeps His promises. So eventually, He took His family into the promised land, and God chose a new leader to take them there, a guy who would trust Him with his whole heart like Moses had. Yep, Joshua. And that's the story of when Joshua became the leader of God's family. So in case you missed it, here's the quick version. God took care of His family. He promised them a new home. They had to trust Him. 12 spies visited Canaan. People already lived there. Joshua and Caleb trusted God. Most of God's family got scared. God's family stayed in the desert. God kept His promise. Joshua got ready to lead God's family into the promised land. And that's a part of God's story.
So Moses could not enter the promised land, so he appointed Joshua as the new leader of the Israelites. And it was Joshua who led the Israelites into the land of Canaan, defeated the kingdom of Jericho, and then went on to help Israel gain all the land of Canaan. The land was then divided among the 12 tribes of Israel. If you can see the map, you can see how the land was divided among the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, the Israelites, before conquering the land of Canaan, lived a nomadic life. They did not have concrete houses. And now they had begun farming. They lived in houses made of mud and stone. They now had their own property. And you can see the construction of these houses in the pictures that are being displayed in the video. Their life was now no longer about moving from here to there. However, the life was good for the people who had a lot of money. They could buy whatever they needed. Whereas the people who couldn't afford much still lived a very dreary life. They had to work in the fields of the rich people, could hardly afford any food or clothing. The Israelites also had the problems of their neighboring countries such as Philistines, the Ammonites trying to conquer the land every time. Each tribe was concerned only with its own welfare and problems and didn't see itself as a part of the whole clan of Israel. And so they quarreled among each other for power and supremacy. Geographically, the northern tribes of Israel were separated from the others by the plain of Jezreel, which still belonged to the Canaanites, while the deep Jordan Valley separated the eastern and western tribes. So there was no regular national army, and often, in order to wage war, a tribal leader had to recruit mercenaries or paid troops from the outside. But the small armies were poorly equipped, and Israel still battled with axes and slingshots. Very few had bronze swords or lances. There came such a time that when there was one such huge battle among the Philistines and the Israelites, they captured the Ark of the Covenant, and the Israelites were pretty shaken about it because they found more strength in the presence of the Ark of the Covenant at the battle. But it didn't last for long because God punished the Philistines for capturing the Ark of the Covenant. The Philistines were scared and then managed to return the Ark of the Covenant in a cart led by two oxen. And the ark was eventually taken to a place called Kiryat Jearim, situated in the hills west of Jerusalem, where it would remain until the time when King David would move it back to Jerusalem.
Samuel was a judge over Israel. At this time, Israel had no king, but they wanted a king. Samuel was getting old, so he let his sons, Joel and Abijah, be rulers over Israel. But Joel and Abijah were not good judges like their father was. They weren't fair in how they judged. They were dishonest. The leaders of Israel went to Samuel. "You were a good judge," they said, "but your sons are not like you. We don't want them to lead us. We want a king." The other nations around Israel had kings. The Israelites wanted one too. Samuel didn't know what to say, so he prayed to God. "Samuel, give the people what they want," God said. "They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting me as king. Give them what they want, but make sure you warn them what it will be like to have an earthly king." Samuel told the Israelites what rights an earthly king would have. A king could make their sons serve in the army, he could make their daughters work for him, or he could take away their fields and servants. Samuel warned the people that they would regret wanting a king. The Israelites didn't care. "Give us a king," they replied.
The tribal leaders had recognized that a king warrior was the need of the hour to unite the tribes to fight the foreign powers, especially against the Philistines. Samuel foresaw the tension that would rise between the political head, the king, and the religious head, the prophet. Would the kings usurp the rights and duties of the religious leaders? Would they try to control any other aspects of the Israelites' life besides war and protection of tribes from foreign powers? Some of the Jews strongly felt the risk involved in establishing a monarchy. Samuel realized that any form of monarchy would mean a lack of trust in God, but God asked Samuel to give in to the people's desires, asking him to warn them of what it would cost them to have a king. Let us now take a prayer posture. Sit erect, hands on your lap. Take in deep breaths and focus your eyes on the sacrament that you can see on your screen. Let us now listen to the word of God taken from the first book of Samuel. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking a king from him. He said, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plough his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your men servants and maid servants and the best of your cattle and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day You will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that day. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us now reflect on the passage that was just read. Samuel gave a list of the deeds the king would ask of the sons in wartime and in peacetime. Could you name some? Horsemen to run before the chariots, perfumers, cooks, bakers. How much tribute would the king demand from their fields? A tenth of grain and vineyards and flocks. In other words, Samuel was reminding them of the price to be paid. Much of their freedom would be restricted, and they would have to work as the king's slaves as well as pay the price for the king's needs: chariots, cattle, donkeys, etc. Yet the people insisted on having a king like the neighboring countries who would fight their battles and win them. We see clearly that God was with people in their political choices, guiding them to discern and finally choose an effective form of government. He is not a distant person who stays aloof from the political struggles of his people. In fact, he shows them that they need his guidance even in politics. Let us now take time to thank God for intervening in our day-to-day affairs in this manner. This story leads us to see the hand of God in the likes of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, the architect of the Indian Constitution. Let us pause for a short while to allow this feeling of gratitude well up in our hearts. Thank God for the gift of Dr. Ambedkar to our nation. It is often heard that politics is dirty business. We must stay away from politics. It's full of lies, deception. We don't know what is true or false. After listening to the story of Israel's decision to ask God for a king, would you agree with this statement or disagree with it? Write down your thoughts about this statement in short and share your views with your catechism teacher or your parent. So this term, we will be listening to biblical stories with a positive attitude to politics and patriotism. Hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Be safe and see you in the next class. Bye students and thank you.